Hi, Rama. It's week 29, day one of our Bible narrative reading plan. Today we are in Psalms 58 and 78. In Psalm 58, David is speaking of earthly rulers, of earthly judges, and he asks, verse 1, "Do you indeed decree what is right? Do you judge rightly?" And the answer is no, they're not doing that at all. They're judging poorly, they're judging sinfully, and David has vivid language about what he wants to happen to them. He's praying that God, the ultimate judge, would bring about justice, and he uses very striking language. Break their teeth in their mouth, Lord. Let them be like the snail that dissolves into slime. What vivid language. But this is David pointing to the fact that God truly is the ultimate judge. No matter what an earthly judge may do, no matter how wrong we may mess up justice on this earth, God, the one who is just, the one who defines justice, it's part of his essence, his being, he will set all things right. And there will come the day when all of creation will join in verse 11, surely there is a God who judges on earth. But then we look at Psalm 78, and it's quite a lengthy psalm. And it begins with an introduction. The psalm itself has an introduction, verses 1 through 4. It's a psalm not of David, but of Asaph, someone we saw last week. And the introduction reminds us that he's going to tell the children, he's going to tell the generations following what has happened. Things that we have heard and known that our fathers have told us. Verse 3, we will not hide them from our children, but tell the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders that he has done. So now where does Asaph start? You might think that he starts with creation or the life of Abraham, but no, he begins with the law. Verse 5 starts telling us about the testimony of the law, God giving the law to his people at Mount Sinai. Why has he done that? Verse 7, so that they would set their hope in God and not forget the works of God. But as Asaph, the psalmist, continues to tell the story of Israel, they do forget the works of God. Starting in verse 8, he tells the story of the Exodus, and he spends a great deal of time, really verses 8 through 55, 56. He's going through there with that first generation, how God delivered them out of bondage to slavery and sin in Egypt, and they are now being led by God, but they sin, they disobey, they're not faithful, and so now they wander in the wilderness for 40 years. And verse 56, yet they tested and rebelled against the Most High God and did not keep his testimonies. That's that first generation that ultimately all died in the wilderness except for Caleb and Joshua. But then we see that the next generation didn't fare so well either. They forgot the works of God. They didn't set their hope in God as verse 7 instructed. The second generation, verse 57, they turned away and acted treacherously like their fathers. They twisted like a deceitful bow. They provoked him to anger. And the psalmist just goes on. And from generation to generation to generation, God's people sin. They disobey. They don't keep the covenant. But, verse 68, he does have a remnant. He does have some faithful ones. God himself chooses the tribe of Judah. Are there perfect people in Judah? No, they still sin. But God's choosing of the tribe of Judah preserves the line of his Redeemer. God said he would send a Redeemer. And the psalmist ends here on the note of this Redeemer in the form of the Davidic covenant. He closes the psalm with verses 69 through 72 talking about the coming of David. And we know that God made a covenant with King David, and it's out of the line of David that Jesus himself would come. So even as the psalmist Asaph recounts, he's going to tell the generations what has happened. The generations before failed, and the generations after will fail, but for the work of Jesus Christ of the tribe of Judah, of the line of David. Here's a summary of today's reading. For more information, go to tunemyheart.org.